Yeah, they're coming. They're coming. So what we're going to do this afternoon is switch back into intensive discussion and planning mode again. And all of the discussions actually so far lead really well into what we have planned for this time, which is, and actually I would encourage everyone to kind of face each other a little bit more instead of everyone facing one direction. So these guys, you guys face this way, you guys face this way a bit. And what we're going to do is talk about some ideas for having a round-robin testing exercise over the next year or so that what we can, the basics of it are having the same set of stoves at each testing center. Everyone can test the same stoves, compare their results to each other, use that to diagnose some issues you might be having. And then also it becomes a tool in general, and but the details aren't worked out. The specific challenges and issues may be related to altitude or particular environmental conditions. It's going to be a little bit different at each lab, so we want to make sure we consider that. What is feasible? Are people testing emissions and efficiency and safety, and what other indicators? What do we want to include and measure in this process? So if you guys look at your agenda packets, one of the last few pages, there's a draft plan for round-robin testing. And this plan is just the bare minimum. It's just the skeleton. And what we're hoping to do this week is get everyone's input on this initial plan. How do we flesh out, what are our goals so we know why we're doing this? What are or how do we select which stoves we use and which fuels we use in this process? How to standardize that? How do we set up things in the beginning so that everyone knows what the standard operating procedures, standard methods, standard test conditions, what they will be, guidelines, like similar to the ideas that are already shared in this last session. What are some ideas for people to help figure out what some problems might be? During this process on the data collection and data sharing, what do we need to make sure we capture so that we have useful information to go back and see what might be happening and what might be going wrong? And then at the end of this, I mean, you guys are all at centers that are providing services to the community. How do we communicate the results to people and use this as a mechanism to say, look, we've gone through this process, we're double checking, we're all working together, we are a strong, reliable center, please come to us, work with us, we can help you. So I think, of course, we're not limited to these topics, but these are the kinds of things that I hope we can talk through this week. So I don't think people have had a chance to review the document, so what I would suggest is for us to take a couple minutes now to review it, and then we can get people's initial input on it. Okay, so if you're done reading, let's at least turn in our seats as much as we can so that we're more facing each other. And before we get into the discussion, one thing I really want to emphasize is that the idea here is that this round-robin testing plan is an opportunity for everyone here to collaborate. And that collaboration can start now, today, with the planning for why we're doing this and then setting it up. Victor?
Solo quisiera ver si entiendo bien la idea, es que algunos centros realicen esta serie de pruebas de manera paralela para después compartir y comparar resultados. ¿Esa es la idea?
Yes. So,
what he understood about this draft plan of round-robin testing is that some of the RTKCs will be doing tests, and then we're gonna compare results between the RTKCs.
Okay. Y cada centro lo haría con el equipo que ya tiene, los métodos que usamos y con sus propios recursos, o habría recursos adicionales para realizarlo.
So he asks if every RTKC will do it with the equipment that the specific RTKC has, with the resources this lab has, or should we get like additional resources?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this collaboration is open to any center who wants to join. I think we should definitely make that clear. As for using the existing equipment, I think an example of this was Aprovecho and EPA. They visited each other and they kind of talked through how they're doing the testing, compared their results side by side. And so I think that kind of model, if we can use that for other testing centers, would be a good opportunity. So I think any equipment that you have, we can definitely, each center could use that. And all of this is open to discussion. This is the initial plan. And then what we should think about is, what things do we want to standardize, so that we can effectively do the comparison, that we can make good use of the results? Does that need to be translated back? Did you understand?
Yeah.
Okay. I should say, entiende? Entiende? Or comprende? No, entiende. No.
Es un ensayo que se va a realizar entre varios centros de testeo, con un grupo de cocinas preseleccionado, ¿ya? Y un tipo de indicadores de rendimiento también definidos, de modo que podamos juntar todos los resultados y demostrar a los clientes la calidad de resultados que tienen los centros de testeo.
¿Quién lo financia ese ejercicio?
No, es que dentro de los requisitos del proyecto es que cada laboratorio designa un tiempo,
O sea, cada
propio.
quien financia.
So who pays?
un
Who's going to
tiempo
pay?
propio para participar.
Okay. Quieres participar, pero tú financias tu ejercicio.
So we should, in terms of the financing, we should talk about that, in terms of what's needed. I think that what we can do from the Global Alliance is to support buying the stoves, the fuels, shipping it to everyone. And then I think it's part of the testing centers to use this as an opportunity to strengthen their processes, to contribute their time, and so I think that's what's on the table now, and we should discuss if that fits with your needs. Is that acceptable? We could start there as, is this something that people would have time to participate in? So that's the question.
Do we build in the capacity for this carbon analysis, fuel analysis for carbon? What you presented, should the RTKC have the capabilities to go for fuel analysis?
So I think the carbon balance, it depends on the fuel carbon content, but if wood is more or less the same, then it should be pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think you can do a carbon balance without doing the fuel analysis, just by using default values. Then I think you can get the calculation close. But if you're burning wood fuel, but it's even better if you can do the fuel analysis. That's even better. That makes your numbers. You have more confidence in your numbers in analyzing your fuel. But that would be a good capability to have. But we don't. when we do fuel analysis, we don't have that capability ourselves. We send a sample off to another laboratory that can do it.
So we should consider that as part of the plan too, is do we want to send fuel samples to one standard laboratory to test and compare?
Okay.
Or, yeah, I guess the question is whether we want to go that deep, or.
Yeah, that's an
yeah,
option.
Yeah.
I mean, another option is to use fuels that we can ship, right? So if we use pellets, I don't know, some other briquettes, and use those as standard fuels that are easily shipped, or like kerosene has pretty stable carbon content. Others are options as well. Charcoal's the hard one, and of course that's really relevant for a lot of people. But in terms of comparing apples to apples during round robin testing, I don't think the idea is to maybe tackle the trickiest fuel. It's to see that the equipment and the testing processes and protocols are being conducted in the same way. And for that, you probably really want stable, well-characterized, similar fuels.
And regarding Elmar's point earlier today about the regional testing and knowledge centers providing a place to test local fuels, local use, local practices, I think that's still going to be true. But in addition to that, here's an opportunity for everyone to work together to make sure that our results are all consistent and at a high level of quality. Was there a comment from here somewhere? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So what I wanted to say is when we are testing a particular stove, what I understand is every stove is optimized for a particular fuel. So if we are testing it with say briquettes or a standard fuel, I'm not sure if though we are getting standard results from all the laboratories and we are able to compare them, but then we won't be able to comment on the stove's performance in the field, and that is a trade-off we'll have to decide on, because then we'll have something which is like good for documentation and publication, but when say an industry or a client asks what would be its performance in the field, we will again have to go back and do the testing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the first question. What are our goals? What's within our goals, and then what's outside of the goals of this? So based on your comment, you would then say that the goal of this would not be to provide feedback on the performance of stoves.
Yes,
That's outside of
the comment, the discussion about testing the cooking systems instead of the cook stoves, which we were discussing earlier this morning. I think that is something we should start with, that how we can build in the testing procedures to test the complete system. And I would like to go a step beyond, because now the problem that we are facing currently is that we have tested a lot of stores and we know that okay, these stores are performing in the field, but most of these stores are not getting manufactured or produced in a quantity that can be marketed. So if we are again planning to go ahead and create a market for these products, many of the manufacturers or designers just design a store for the sake of designing it, and it performs really well. But when it comes to buying those stores, most of the people are unable to buy it, or even if they are very expensive. So it kind of defeats the whole point of why we are testing the stores, because we want to disseminate them, and if we are unable to disseminate them, then there's no point in testing such stores. So maybe if we can build in a process or a matrix which accounts for all these things, the cooking system as in the fuel, then the cooking conditions, what kind of people are going to use it, and then some market aspect, and if we can get a score for a particular stove, and then we can say that comprehensively this stove can go into the market or can be disseminated.
Yeah, so I think that definitely the role is to provide feedback to help manufacturers bring a good product to market. The idea here, and there's a list of goals or objectives in the beginning for what goal of this particular exercise would be. So maybe the place to keep the discussion moving is to take a look at those goals. You think those goals are good? How would you change them? Would you add anything? Would you take anything away?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, if this were carried out, it's, the objectives are they're good objectives to meet. If somebody's going to hire you to evaluate their stove, and yeah, there are a lot of stoves that are totally impractical, but hopefully we can find some that are practical. Then they want to be sure that we're giving them true results, and so this would help to achieve that.
Elmar, you want to comment?
Yes, I talked about fuels and it was already cited. I brought even along from Senegal fuel wood that we are using, and it is clear that if we do a test with this wood and you do with the same stove with your fuel a test, the results will not be the same. For round robin testing, we really need all the same stove with all the same fuel. I think this is clear. I just want to mention the methodology of this round robin testing for us will be probably completely different, or not completely different, but different from our day-to-day tests with this type of fuel. So it is just to show that this lab is able to do repeatable results that can be repeated in the US or elsewhere. It's just to test the lab itself and not more. It would not help us to discuss a lot with users, clients, or somebody else. We will go on with this other fuel to do our test. I support the idea of round-robin testing. Probably it is more challenging for us than we expect because of different climate, different circumstances, but it's worth to do it.
Omar?
Though it is probably a matter of details, but just I thought I'll mention it. Maybe the RTKC which initiates about a stove, that this is the stove worth taking up, and if others agree. So let that RTKC takes up the responsibility of shipping it, or I'll suggest even one person accompanying it, so that he goes and learns that what the other RTKC is doing is something what he wants it to be done the way they have been doing, or at least if there is a change, he understands that why the change is there. So let one stove be limited to 3 RTKCs maximum. I think it's minimum and maximum. It shouldn't be less than 3, and probably need not be more than 3. One stove tested at 3 RTKCs, and the initiating RTKC takes the responsibility of taking the fuel, taking the stove, going with the stove, and visiting 2 more RTKCs. So I think something like that may work, and then solve some of the problems of the fuel, etc., and what it is designed for.
So what do people think of that idea of distributing the responsibility to select stoves? In this case, it winds up being less of a challenge to get every single stove everywhere, but then you also don't have any single stove fuel combination that is tested everywhere. So what do people think about that suggestion?
I think it would, so yeah, if there's one testing center that chose a stove, then it would ensure that they knew a method very well and were able to teach it to 2 others. So it would ensure really high, it would ensure that people knew a method very well.
I think that's a good idea, but I don't think it should replace every lab testing the same stove with the same fuel. I think that's also still necessary.
No, but if we are going to as we are saying now that we want to compare different laboratories, then it's a good idea to have the same team go and test the stove. That way we'll keep all the other factors constant, and the only variability will be the laboratory that we are going to. So that way we can say that okay, we are comparing the laboratories. Otherwise it would be mm,
Okay, I understand that when we want to analyze a collaborative process between too many labs, basically we need one sample. In general, it's possible to use one sample, the same sample for each laboratory, and then we can compare the results. But if we have two samples or three samples, obviously we have more problems with analyze the results. And then in the first step, maybe with one sample or one stove, very easy stove, one pot, very simple. And the second step, maybe with more stoves after analyze the first results.
Can you say that in Spanish too? Can you say it in Spanish also?
No, les decía que generalmente para hacer ensayos colaborativos entre varios laboratorios siempre se tiene una muestra patrón, se distribuye la muestra patrón entre todos los laboratorios y luego se analizan los resultados que emite cada laboratorio. Pero en este caso la idea sería tener una primera fase donde se distribuye una sola cocina, muy simple, de una olla que no sea complicada de operar y que todos los laboratorios la analicen. Y luego de eso ya podemos ajustar las diferencias que hayan y luego pasar a una segunda fase con más cocinas, ¿no?
Pero tendrían que ser todos equipados con el mismo tipo de sistema de evaluación.
Sí,
todos con LEN, por
todos.
ejemplo, ¿no?
No,
Gracias.
no necesariamente con LEM, solo con equipo que...
No necesariamente el
Pero
sistema.
va a salir diferente.
No debe ser, no tiene...
La idea es que no salga.
La idea si es si su sistema siempre dice, el sistema es justo, es bueno
Confiable.
y confiable, debe ser
Compatible, comparable.
como eso es lo que hizo con Jim, eso es lo que hizo con Jim, el laboratorio de Jim y nosotros. Tenemos diferentes sistemas, pero tuvimos que hacer.
Y eran incomparables. Si es así, sería interesante, claro.
In the beginning, I was quite skeptic about this, if it is possible, and how much work, how much effort is it compared to the results. But we talked this morning or before this about calibration, and I think to have, if everybody of us has the same stove with the same pot, it would be a very easy methodology for testing my equipment. If I repeat with the same stove the test after 3 months or 6 months, it is a very simple method, without any calculations or anything, just to have something, a standard equipment that I can test today in 3 months, and then I see, is there any difference? This might be a side effect.
I look forward to having this conversation after we've done the round robin, because I think we think that the one of the largest variables in testing can be the operator. So this is going to be very interesting. This is why I'm very excited about this results, to see what kind of variable that is from different labs, if the equipment is even calibrated.
Yeah, so I think I'm hearing two questions that are coming up that maybe we should discuss. One is the number of stoves and how that is handled over time, if we think about it as an issue of calibration, also collaboration. Then do we need a range of span stoves to test a range of concentrations? So that's one question. And then the other question, I forgot, but it'll come back to me. But maybe we can talk about this one first, the number of stoves and how do we select them?
Creo también que habría que considerar estufas con chimenea y estufas sin chimenea, balanceado para poder tener, porque el sistema de captura de todo es diferente.
So he's saying we should consider having chimney stoves and stoves without chimney to also consider the equipment used to capture the emissions.
How many people are in countries where people use chimneys? Okay. Okay, so but a lot of people.
I think we don't have any stove with chimney, but anyway, all the others can test it. For us, it would be very complicated to do just for this test. Just a practical reason. To ship 3 stoves is not much more effort than to ship 1 stove. Even if we test in the beginning perhaps only one of these stoves. Therefore, I think it might be useful to identify perhaps 3 different stoves, a charcoal, a wood stove, and perhaps some with chimney, and then we see if we are really testing. Right?
Yes, I think that it's most important how many replications we can do with one stove that with that number of the stoves. I think that's more important how many replications we can have with one stove than with more stoves with less replication. Huh?
What would you propose for a number of applications?
Too much replication and too low number of stoves.
At Averecho, we've kind of come to 7 for a good practical number. 7 replications for each stove.
It's tough.
Or we can just make it 9 so that the square root is easy.
Yeah. So that was a question I would have. So if we are talking maybe 5 to 7 replications per stove, resource-wise for the different centers, what do people feel like with the number of stoves you'd be able to do? That's a good question I have. I mean, it might be easier, to start with 1, obviously, because for resource reasons, I guess.
Maybe 6.
6 stoves or 6 replications?
Sounds good.
In our lab practice, the number of replications depends on the variability of the first 3 tests. So I would say this depends also on the lab, and this is a test for the lab to see when they say now we have got our enough replications to have viable results. I think it's unnecessary to fix this number of tests.
That sounds good.
Is there a comment here too?
This is on a slightly different topic, but on that, the reason why we've been wrestling a lot with trying to fix the number is because it's part of our business to test stoves. And so when you give somebody quotes, you have to say a reasonable number. So we've done a lot of number crunching recently to figure out, because we used to just do 3, and then we'd give people the COVs and let them know. And then now we realize we're trying to bring up a higher little quality, so we've been trying to figure out. So it's really 5 to 7 is where we're at right now, for our budgeting purposes for.
We propose also 5 as minimum.
Yeah.
And Elmar also proposed a little bit of a list, right, for how to select the stoves, a charcoal stove, a wood stove, and then what was the, so that's also
prepared.
wrapped into the number of stove issue. Which stoves, what's our criteria for what types of stoves would be useful? Round robin testing stoves, what kinds of stoves would be useful calibration stoves?
Stoves
And fuels.
Well, I noticed that we're talking about round robin testing for 2014. Maybe just 1 round of testing. Maybe we should just select what makes sense for the first year. Well, we want to do so many stoves. Maybe we should pick the easiest, that which we think will have the least amount of variability.
Yeah, we can consider that like the first of 3 or 4 stoves, and just not say we're only doing 1, but at the same time only do 1.
Yeah, it seems to me that maybe like the easiest one to start with would be some kind of a batch-loaded stove, like a TLUD type stove with pellet fuel
Easy to ship.
that has no operator, basically, you know, so the operator is removed from the equation, and then it only tests the laboratory. Then, but I know other people have said that we also want to, over time, we want to test a rocket stove to test the operators as well as the equipment. But I don't know if it seems like on one hand it would be good to start with one and then see how much variation we get and you know, do it step by step. But then on the other hand, maybe it's easy, you know, it's easy to, because the shipping is easier.
You can ship 3, but start with 1.
Yeah,
And then you look to the results and then you decide if you go.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I obviously don't have as much experience shipping fuels as most of you, but I know Jim and I have had issues getting fuel samples into the United States from certain places because of concerns for biological contaminants coming in with them. And so that may have to play a factor into what stoves we choose too if we're shipping the fuels.
Yeah. We did, Creek will be here in a little bit, and they just figured out how to ship charcoal to us, so they might have some advice.
They got pellets too.
Oh, they got pellets? No, that came from California.
Oh.
That was from California.
Well, to put some numbers, I think for 1 WBT, it's 1 to 2 kilos of fuel, and so if we did 7 WBTs, that'd be 7 to 14 kilos of fuel. So that's
And then a few extra, just in case.
or 7 to 14. So however much that costs.
Okay, and then there was also proposed in the draft, a plan proposed for oversight as well, to kind of guide the process and check on and give people feedback as kind of a committee to kind of give advice to people. What are people's thoughts on this? Is that a useful mechanism to have, or kind of everyone just collaborates with each other and that's good enough and we don't need this oversight committee?
I think there would need to be somebody that would receive all the data.
So maybe rather than thinking of it as like an oversight, you're doing things right or wrong committee, maybe just an oversight as far as, okay, now it's time to start talking to one another committee. Just to kind of
To keep things moving.
to keep things moving, yeah, to contact all the individual RTKCs and say, okay, time to schedule a meeting.
And actually related to that, I'm gonna grab a mic. What I was thinking for this week is to put together at least an initial planning committee for this. And so the idea is that I think we're not going to be able to resolve things before dinner, and we need to make sure to get to dinner and get out in time, as we heard from Tim. So over the next few days, this group could make sure to talk with everyone across different languages, different countries, get feedback from everyone, and then take this draft, modify it, flesh it out, the idea of phasing things, what kinds of stoves would be selected, what kinds of fuels, how much fuel, how do we do the shipping, work out some more of the details based on what you think is reasonable or what people think is reasonable, and then circulate the updated draft to everyone here, and then we can talk about it again, revisit it on Saturday.
I have just one question. Are your labs testing throughout the whole year, or are there periods when they are closed? In Senegal, for example, we have 3 months of rainy season when the conditions are completely different from the rest of the year. Then we stopped testing, only because we like planning, time scheduling. If you have any constraints in this.
Yeah, that's important. That's a good point. Everyone else is testing throughout the year? You guys are very special.
Maybe in rainy season, I think maybe nobody tests the stoves.
mostly during monsoon.
Yeah, during monsoon period, so fuel-wise, stove-wise,
Yeah.
we should skip on that, these months.
Okay. And then the rainy season, actually for me, it's always rainy season. But in your countries, the rainy season, it's good. We're going to have it at different times for different countries, right? So we should think about the coordination and planning of how we can share the results too. And of course, we should plan out what information we need to collect.
Yeah, I guess there'd be an application program process where you calibrated all this stuff, and one of them be what months could you test, and
Yeah, I think the lab would have to have the calibration gases to participate.
Or if they were just doing, we could do this for just efficiency.
yeah, that's true. If we do just fuel efficiency, it's true.
Depends on the lab. So
Yeah.
some labs could do emissions and efficiency. We could do this for safety too as well.
That's good.
Or if we want to consider some field stuff or just focus on lab, that's another question.
Mm-hmm.
Any volunteers?
Sure.
Okay.
Excited. What are we volunteering for?
To be on a committee to.
For just this week, to gather input and then circulate the input and then facilitate the discussion. Okay. So we had Michael, Mike,
Volunteering or?
Marcelo.
Yep, Seth, Gabriela.
Come on, we need some representations.
Anyone? Well, let's try
That's
to
all.
cover
That's all Western
different
hemisphere.
continents.
That's all our hemisphere. We got the southern hemisphere, but Western
Okay,
hemisphere.
David. So Asia, South Asia, Africa. Okay, Vasudev.
Antarctica.
Huh?
Antarctica.
Who's from Antarctica?
There's penguins on his computer. I saw.
Yeah, you can nominate Agnes.
That's 8 people. Okay. So I should be overhearing conversations over the week. Gathering additional.
And what exactly is our job then?
Besides eavesdropping.
So here. So these next 3 days. The next 3 days, mingle, discuss, get ideas from people, and then take the draft or completely throw the draft out and start fresh, whatever winds up happening, and modify that, create an update, and then we can work with the Zamorano team here to make sure we can get printouts or email it to the participant list or email it to me and I can get it to everyone so that we have an update to review and then discuss on Saturday.
So from that group, does someone want to be the secretary, and then everyone can get things to that person? Would anybody here want to? It'd be great if it was like Tim, because he probably has facilities. If Tim would want to be on it, that'd be great, because then we could just give to him stuff that he could print up, because he has facilities. So maybe we could ask Tim if he would be on the committee.
Yeah, we can check with him.
Or maybe.
But I think given how much is going on, probably adding more to Tim's
or to theirs in general,
plate might be hard. So they can. I think we should count on them for printing help.
Okay.
But if we can.
Well, if somebody else wants to, otherwise I'm fine. If you bring me ideas, I would incorporate into the.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't bring me anything, nothing happens. Is that a good way for it to happen? Or we can have a meeting. We love meetings.
You don't need to call yourself the secretary. You could be called president.
Oh, I like. Come on, that's a highfalutin.
Yeah.
Dictator.
And so just so you guys know, so for the rest of you, you're not off the hook either. You need to find these people and make sure they get your input too. But the group of volunteers was Michael, Mike, Jim, Marcelo, Seth, Gabriela Duarte, and you're Gabriela Esparza. Gabriela Duarte, David, and Basudev. Can you guys raise your hands, just to confirm?
Can we schedule a meeting with this group sometime? Let's do that right now, perhaps.
Wait, so when are you getting the beer? No, I'm sorry.
Exactly. This is how we will solicit responses. You want a beer? Well.
And I think another thing to consider for the group that we haven't discussed yet is what other questions do we have about our systems and our equipment? Or like Aprovecho, you guys are designing and developing equipment. What would you like to know about how the systems are operating in different places? Yeah, go ahead.
No, just on the meeting, and that, Michael, I can follow up. Maybe the Thursday night dinner. Do we all want to get to sit together at the same table? Would that be one way to happen?
I'm just looking at the schedule right now. Seems like, yeah.
That's
Dinner.
Thursday night dinner, you guys are supposed to be having fun. So I'm going to veto that idea.
Oh, you wait. This doesn't sound like fun to you? When are we presenting? When are we presenting to the group on Friday?
Saturday, but we'll have time for discussing again and finalizing the plan on Saturday. But if you can get the updated version to people before then, that would be good.
What about this return trip?
Oh yeah, on the
back
bus.
On Friday, we could sit together.
On the bus?
The bus. All right, I'll bring my computer and take notes. Sounds good.
That works.
So, yeah, do we want to touch base at lunch tomorrow? We also, why does that have to be dinner?
No, I was gonna give more time because I guess I was thinking maybe we were presenting Friday, but no, we're presenting Saturday. So, if
Yeah, lunch tomorrow.
So.
Yeah, but you may also need to meet a few different times.
Right. So we'll hit at lunch tomorrow and see what we get done,
great.
and then go from there. How about that?
Okay.
Lunch tomorrow.
So for everyone else, talk to these people. Make sure they hear your opinions on this.